Good morning, everyone. It's August 27th. Happy Labor Day. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz. It's This Week in XR podcast, and we've got some good stuff to discuss today. But first, Ted, you got any plans for the weekend?
I do have some plans for the weekend. I mean, I'll certainly be doing my normal range of hopping in and out of VR and a little MR. But it's an outdoor weekend here. It's still nice. We're actually tracking the fires up north. I just got back, as you know, from Yosemite and Mammoth, doing some in the real world stuff, not Metaverse stuff, with my son, who's a professional in that realm. He's a guide in Yosemite and runs part of a program up there. But now the fires are starting to encroach. When we were there was some smoke and some issues, but Tahoe is now under some severe threat.
I understand actually the air in San Francisco is quite bad now.
Yeah, it's up north is pretty bad. So
holy crow.
That's what we're doing. Keeping a close eye.
All right. Well, on to a happier topic. 4VR just raised $7 million, bringing their total raise to $8.5 million. They launched 4VR bowling on the Quest and other VR platforms. We were just talking about it. We said, don't use it up in the prep.
Yeah.
That's our problem. We use up our show in the prep. Oh, you know what? Speaking of prep, I didn't say at the top of the show, we've got Alvin Graylin, president of HTC China, coming on as our guest today.
Right.
Not only is Alvin an all-around great guy, but he is super insightful and articulate about what's going on in China, which is very opaque to us, which is odd given the scale of its, immersive media business there. So it's always great to catch up with Alvin. I'm sure he'll have some things to say about the metaverse, and perhaps we'll hear more about what HTC is doing in China, where I think they have a much bigger footprint than they do here in the US.
I think Alvin will be very insightful, and I think we're going to learn a few things that maybe we knew but didn't remember. I mean, certainly I've been to China many, many times through my journeys on this sort of XR learning and evolution journey.
Right.
And
you've given me FOMO. Let's go back to 4 bowling, which everybody can do. A couple of ex-Zynga guys. I guess the raise is to do more social type games.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice that everybody knows bowling, right? No splaining needed.
Yep.
And they use the avatars from Facebook. So Facebook's avatar strategy is starting to play out through the Quest on games like 4VR bowling. And I believe they're using them also in Pro Putt.
Yeah, your internet is fading in and out today. Got most of it.
I apologize, listeners. I was saying that 4VR uses the Facebook avatar system, as does Pro Putt. And so this is the beginning of that. And I have to say that Facebook avatar system, I know everybody wants to dump on Facebook, but it's nice.
Yeah, and I think, what we've been touching on for weeks now, we're starting to see these threads of that interoperability of this term of the metaverse starting to come into play here, right? So here's a younger startup that has adopted that sort of protocol to bring it in. As you mentioned, the Topgolf Pro Putt stuff is using it, and a few others are using it. So that's kind of that transportability. One of the things I think you'll remember about bowling, and it's one of the, when I was in the in-person world pre-pandemic, when I used to give a lot of presentations around the world, you probably remember I had a sort of a centerpiece about my presentation when I talked about VR, that the Wii and Wii games was really a precursor to all of what we're doing today. And if you remember, Wii Sports and Wii Bowling was a very, very big part of their launch activities on the Wii, as well as the Miis. If you remember the Mii avatars, there's an interesting kind of almost evolution of the Facebook Horizon avatars and the Mii avatars from the Wii. So everything sort of lives in that realm of, metaphors of the real world, bowling, golf, boxing, etc., that we're seeing populate in VR very successfully because people like to make connection, right? And I think this bowling thing is, here comes the revenge of the Wii all over again. So I keep close track on that stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting because of course the Wii, is driven by a sensor that sits on by the television and detects your movements.
Right. It was essentially the beginnings of virtual reality, and we didn't wear
Yeah.
a screen on our face, and it wasn't fully immersive, but it was the beginnings of the understanding of what spatial gaming could be in the home, and it made quite a large impact that is still felt today in VR.
So here's another topic. Snapchat added a scan feature to their camera, and they put it front and center, so you really can't miss it. For those of you who aren't aware, Google has this also, by the way. It's called Google Lens, and it uses computer vision to help understand what you're seeing, what the camera is seeing. So, for example, you could hold it up to a denim jacket, and it'll say, "Do you want to buy a denim jacket?" You can hold it up to a tree, and it'll identify the tree. Oh, pine tree, maple tree, sycamore tree, and apparently, you can, hold it up to have it do math problems and translation, and it's all packed into one feature called scan. So I think that's pretty amazing use of computer vision. And again, the camera as a sensor, not just to take pictures.
Yep. And again, you've tapped a vein that is becoming a very wide mainstream use case of machine learning and camera technology, CMOS technology, right? To actually be able to recognize things in the world, not just capture things in the world. And that is obviously being used at an industrial level and now brought down to a consumer level. And I think that's the next sort of big step in where all this goes.
We don't talk about Snap, and Snap is not as self-promoting as some of its competitors, but I really like what they're doing.
Yeah, and I'm keeping a very close eye on their prototype, AR mixed reality glasses. I think they are largely taking the right approach to not releasing them as a commercial product, as we've seen, some of the foibles of others that tried to release too early, but actually developing a developer ecosystem and a learning stage that may actually be multiple years before they actually find commercialization. I think they've learned on their own with some of the earlier iterations of the glasses, what the challenges and foibles of trying to commercialize too quickly are. And we're at a stage now within these companies as they mature as companies where they realize they need to derive value over time and build a product category, not just launch a product category and hope it finds a home. So I think that's a smart approach on Snap's part.
And so, of course, TikTok is testing TikTok Effects Studio so as not to fall behind Snap and Instagram. They're trying to create a platform for both their commercial clients as well as to develop a creator community around a kind of lens studio, a codeless, if you will, cloud-based system for creating AR effects for TikTok.
Have you spent any time, Charlie, feeling how terrifying and amazingly accurate the algorithm effect in TikTok is once they get you on their infinite, hamster wheel loop of watching the content and
I was
finding
thinking
things
about that.
Continues. It's quite amazing. I mean,
I don't know whether it's better than YouTube's. YouTube's is very powerful. I mean, I look at very eclectic stuff on YouTube, and it seems to understand me, which is kind of scary. And so I won't even tell you the stupid stuff I look at on YouTube when I'm just wasting time. I will tell you, this is a
conversation.
I'm supposed to be working on my lesson plan for next week, and I've sat here staring at my old lesson plans, playing the guitar. It's like I never play the guitar, Ted. I mean, this is pretty much a prop. But today I played this, but this week I played this thing for like 20 hours.
There you go. Yeah, well, it's found its way in your brain.
I wonder if I can remember the, introduction to Long Tall Woman.
And then you YouTube it, you find it, you play it.
Yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember now. Your fingers remember before you do.
I love it.
What the hell did I just do? I have to remember that.
Yeah, and where did that last hour just go? Right.
Exactly. Well, speaking of the hour, it is flying by. So let's bring in Alvin and have some China talk.
Love it.
Alvin Graylin is our guest today. Alvin, great to see you. He is the president of HTC China. And in many ways, to those of us inside the industry, really with Dan O'Brien and the enterprise team, is the most visible HTC executive. So I feel really thrilled to have you here with us, Alvin, to talk about the metaverse.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sure, to talk about the metaverse and the industry in general, and how HTC is feeling about things. I'm interested in learning from you more about the Chinese market, where HTC is a lot more visible than it has been in the US, aside from Viveport, of course, which lots of people continue to use.
Yeah, I mean, every day there seems to be breaking news. So definitely the industry is moving very quickly, and like you're saying, the last few weeks, last few months, I think the whole metaverse thing is really been in the forefront of a lot of conversations. And as we just mentioned, I think it's probably done a little bit too early, and it's done in a way where too many people are associating everything under the kitchen sink as being something related to metaverse, and it's probably not a helpful way to get that concept out to people. So. But I mean, I don't know. Do you want to start with this whole metaverse thing?
Yeah, let's start with the. I mean, Facebook came out with workrooms last week.
Yeah,
let's give them some props for that. There's plenty of fiction. It's not like millions of people are going to be using workrooms next week.
Yeah, sure.
But it's a very, very cool product, and it uses computer vision and pass-through. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going on. They built an app, which is kind of a Zoom competitor, which works with the pass-through in the VR. So, they thought they hit one of the big metaverse themes with this product, which was the cross-platform nature of it.
Sure, and I mean, I think they've done a really good job in marketing. But I mean, as you mentioned, it's really nothing new, right? I mean, we've been doing the Sync product for almost 2 years now. It's almost exactly the same product. I think they've done a few things a little bit improved in terms of, I think that the keyboard see-through. I really like that. Although that's also not a new concept. That's something that's been in the spatial
and in fairness,
for a while.
And in fairness, there are some technology problems, like your hands block the computer vision when you're typing, and at some point the keyboard just disappears. It's had enough. But I assume that's.
And also things like you. Yeah, I mean those things. Some of these things will never work. Be fully resolved because cameras can't see behind your hands, right? But I think in general that concept makes a lot of sense. It's still fairly limited. I think it only works on 3 different keyboards right now out of the thousands out there, right? So it doesn't work for the average keyboard. You have to have a Logitech or a Magic Keyboard, I think, or a MacBook Pro or something.
Right, it works pretty well with my MacBook, but like I said, there were times when it just got confused and stopped. That said, I mean, they're trying to do a pretty advanced thing with pretty primitive technology, and again, I mean, I thought that it was interesting that they were trying to make the point about the metaverse being cross-platform. That was a really big theme for them in it, and I thought that was fair because for this to be really big, it has to be detached from headsets. You can't say that without everybody having an HMD, there is no metaverse. So I thought they made that point by bringing the computer into VR. I think they were making a point that the metaverse.
Yeah. Although I think that's actually not a new point. I mean, I don't know if you remember our XR Suite launch a year ago. That was our main point to the world, was to really for VR or XR type meetings to take off, it has to allow existing devices to go in. So we allow phones, we allow PCs, tablets, Apple, Android, everything, plus VR devices, standalone VR devices, and PC-based VR devices of any brand to get in. I think that's still a very big difference than what they're doing today, which is Oculus Quest only device with PCs. Right. So and it's actually, you still have to have the headset. You still have to have the headset to use it. Right. So I think it's nice that they're bringing the interface, the traditional interface of the mouse, or actually just the keyboard and trackpad. But I think that's a good start for what they're doing. But it is definitely nothing new, right? None of the things that they've actually presented were new technologies. They just really did a very good job in terms of marketing and getting the message out, and getting Gayle King to interview Mark Zuckerberg in the workroom.
Oh, I know, that was that was huge.
Great PR.
I mean, the Facebook PR and communications team is like the White House.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm just listening to the two of you guys talk and pontificate about this with a big smile on my face, because you're touching all these things that I have these kind of weird work streams and touch things about in my world.
Wait, Ted, I've got one for you, because I know that you lived this with me. In 2008, Zuckerberg said that Facebook was going to be a mobile first company.
Mm.
And that was when, the Facebook app sucked. It was bad.
Yeah, but if you watch the forward trajectory of what a Quest and a Quest 2 are, they are effectively a mobile device, right? They are not tethered to any workstation or cabling, as its primary resource. And I actually agree with that thesis quite a bit, that if you want something to work and find scale in the pieces that we're going to find scale for these things, these devices need to rely on the power of mobile compute and powerful mobile chipsets, which of course our friends down in San Diego at Qualcomm, which don't get enough credit, are really powering that revolution.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for inviting me to join you and Ted. And I look forward to this conversation. And talking about either China or VR or Metaverse or whatever you're interested in. So,
well, I mean, first of all, what's life like in China? Are you guys traveling around? Is it still masked up, 6 feet apart indoors? I mean, what is that feeling like these days?
I think it's I would say 90% back to normal, right? In the sense of we can fly inside the country pretty much anywhere instantly, and no real problems. But you are constantly being tracked by your phone where you're going. And for instance, 2 weeks ago, I went to the biggest game conference in Asia, China Joy. And when I came back from Shanghai, apparently I drove through an area of Shanghai that had 1 case. And so then my record was marked as being a mildly potentially dangerous person who's been in a district of 10 million people that had that 1 case. And so I couldn't get into my building. Because they wouldn't give me a green code, so I had to wait 2 weeks to get back into the office because of that. So they're very, very careful, which is also why they've been able to keep the cases down. So essentially, you're talking about single-digit cases in the whole country, and they freak out about it when that 1 case happens. So but
well, that is, I guess that's the whole story right there about the difference between China and the US. I mean, I don't think people in the US don't realize that everybody knows where you are at all times, right? It's not that different. Here, the information is out there if they need it. If they, whoever they is.
Everybody's being tracked in the world, right? I mean, with phones, you're making that available, and a lot of people are doing it on their own with all the social posts that you're doing. So the whole concept of privacy that people keep arguing about, honestly, it hasn't existed for probably 5 to 10 years now. But so we're just lying to ourselves a little bit. But in China, it's definitely very obvious that you are being tracked, and that information is being used in different ways. And I actually don't mind, honestly, in this case. If it's for the health of other people and just to keep things safe and be able to track, where potential cases are happening and prevent it from spreading, I think that's a very good use of that information.
Yeah, in some ways, being more overt versus more surreptitious as it is in the West, where we, because we work, pretty deeply in tech, do pretty intimately understand how much tracking is going on and how much these companies are monetizing from that information. Whereas in China, and my life has spent many, many, many months in China in various work environments. you get oddly comfortable with the idea of what is going on. There is that sort of benevolent dictatorship dynamic that you get a little concerned about, but
Sure.
overall, people do function with a lot of freedom and an understanding that the tracking is overt and aware, which is a little different than it is in the West. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the US, pretty much everybody's being tracked. They just don't know they're being tracked. I mean, I mean Snowden, when he released those files, everybody, I mean, there's so many people being tracked.
Right.
Every conversation is being tracked. So you know, which I think they're just yeah, exactly. So it's overt versus covert tracking. That's all.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
So has HTC had an uptick in consumer and enterprise business during the pandemic in China?
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, we last quarter was our best quarter in the last 5 years. So, you know, I can't say too much details about what, you know, our finances, but we definitely see an increase in demand, and also a you know, a broadening of types of industries that are looking at VR. So I think it's a plus for the industry. I mean, it's essentially a hidden benefit of something that's quite tragic, right? That it's accelerated, you know, hybrid work. It's accelerated XR. It's accelerated a lot of the, you know, e-commerce activities. So it's
and there's no Oculus in China, right? They're
yes and no. So officially, it's not supposed to be here, but it's actually selling pretty well. I think it's like the #3 selling device in China right now. And it's being sold on the Alibaba platform, and people would actually sell a VPN router together with this device, and they've hacked it already, and so essentially you pay $0 on any of the software, and it's a fixed fee, so it's selling really well because it's super affordable because it's you know, Facebook is subsidizing it, but they're actually not getting any real data,
right?
And they're not getting software revenue. So it's for the consumers who are buying it, it's a benefit, but it's also a very uncertain benefit because at any time the government can turn it off.
Right. This is the magic of what we refer to broadly as gray market goods, right? That they live on the edge. They largely move in through Hong Kong through those channels. And they do kind of proliferate, as I saw in many of my trips to China, the type of consumer electronics that are massively adopted, but not fully supported. And they're supported in this sort of gray market way. It's kind of a fascinating part of it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one thing about China is that there definitely is a lot of gray in a lot of places. And it's intentionally left that way, in a way that the government creates laws that they want to test. And then it's about the enforcement. So how much do you want to enforce it or not?
Right.
And you know, so I'll give an example, like the WeChat Pay or Alipay. You know, it essentially became the currency for the country for 5 years. I mean, nobody's carrying cash anymore, right? And if you think about it, you know, if
that's also true in the US,
government
by the way.
Allow it,
that's also true in the US. Well, nobody carries cash anymore.
No, but people carry credit cards that was using essentially, you know, using US dollars in the back. But here it's actually, you know, being controlled. All of the currency, the transfers, the security, everything's being controlled by two companies.
Yeah, if you were
two private companies.
When I was in China, if you weren't lucky enough to be able to be into that WeChat environment as someone that was coming in from overseas, you were at an extraordinary disability. You were at extraordinary disadvantage because WeChat was literally the currency that moved everything. You couldn't get a cup of coffee easily without WeChat. You couldn't get on public transit easily without WeChat. Yeah. It became literally the bank, like WeChat. But now, obviously, another page has turned.
So this is kind of what I'm saying is that now that essentially the government's like, okay, we kind of figured it out. We let the experiment run for a while. You know, even though they're not supposed to do that and they don't have a banking license, they shouldn't be doing any of this, right? Including Alipay and all the ant stuff, right? And then they came back and said, okay, now let's try to regulate it back down and try to make it something that's managed, that it doesn't become overly out of control. Because honestly, you know, a couple of companies or maybe 3 companies in the country were controlling 80 to 90% of the internet businesses because they essentially created kind of cartels of groups that excluded each other, created anti-competitive policies between them. It's like you have to pick one of us or you can't be on it. And so I think that's what prompted a lot of the crackdown recently. Although I think in the West it's seen as, oh, the government's cracking down on private business. It's actually the government let private business run for 10 years, kind of completely unregulated to see where it would go, and then now it's bringing back into more alignment. Right? I mean, yeah. So
it's a great insight. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not much different than what we do in the West with these large tech companies when the government tries to rein them in and regulate them more and potentially break them up. It's actually a similar psychology.
I mean, this is
what
China
happened. And the US are very different are actually not correct. China and the US are more the same than different in many ways.
Yeah, and I think the difference is in the US, they regulate first, and then they kind of enforce it at different levels. Whereas in China, they don't regulate, and then they regulate when they are clear what actually needs to be regulated.
Yeah, they'll overcorrect accordingly, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the education issues, I mean, the whole sector recently has been totally decimated by new regulations. But in a way, it's a reaction to what's been happening with that sector, where that whole industry's been taking advantage of the whole the one-child policy and everybody putting their investment in their children's education, and people are paying $100 to $200 an hour for tutors, US dollars, right? And these are people that are making $2,000 to $3,000 a month in salary, spending $100 or $200 per hour for tutoring. So the government's like, oh, that's not right. That's you're taking advantage of the average population. So then they're reining it in. And because it's so competitive to get into universities here, every parent feels like they have to do it. If they don't do it, their kid's going to fall behind. And so now they're essentially regulating this to say, hey, look, this level of needing extra tutoring doesn't make sense. The teacher should provide a certain level of education. And if you're gonna do tutoring, tutor it as a nonprofit so that you're helping the industry or helping the society, but not profiting individually, right? So they're saying essentially education should be a right, not a privilege for the wealthy, right? So in a way, from a high level perspective, it makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's hard to argue with that.
But they did put the regulation together and kind of put it out very quickly, which definitely was a very extreme move. So
right.
So it's
the discussions and debate beforehand is not transparent. In the United States, before a law is made, it's in the news for months. People are arguing about it. And I mean, you look at some of the things. For example, they're trying to pass a big budget in the United States right now, and the Democrats have packed in a lot of policies, which I agree with, which have been thwarted for 30 years.
Right.
So in a sense, we've overanalyzed and over discussed some of these things, and it's the advantage of a centralized government in times of very rapid disruption, being able to respond more quickly to the information, right? So the Chinese government got the information and they were like, all right, well, this isn't, we got to change this. And, the US government gets the information,
I think it's,
and then we have to talk about it for 30 years.
Exactly. I mean, if you look, let's say the high-speed rail issue, right? In the US, there's essentially zero high-speed rail. Yeah. In China, there's like 50,000 miles of high-speed rail. It's got more high-speed rail than everywhere else in the world put together. Right. And that was all executed in like 10 years. Yeah. Right. So it's So I used to live in Boston. I remember that the Big Dig took 12 or 15 years to do a 2-mile tunnel. To do a 2-mile tunnel. When I was in Shanghai in 1996 to 97. There was a 10-mile highway, went from the airport right down to downtown Shanghai, that took a 2-hour commute into a 15 to 20-minute commute.
Yep, I've
been on it. They moved out 1 million people in the path of this highway. It took them a year.
Wow, amazing. Right. So let's pivot back to VR and tell us how HTC's consumer business which is based on the Vive Focus, right, is going in China.
No. So actually, the Vive Focus is still mostly a B2B product.
Oh, just
right?
like in the US, for some reason, I was confused about that.
Yeah, so we do sell the Focus to consumers here, which I think is the difference is that we make it available. But the price point of the Focus is probably about 2 times the price point of the local manufacturers that we support. So I don't know, I think you're familiar with our Vive Wave program. We actually software and the technology and the infrastructure to almost all of our local competitors to enable a low-cost solution to be provided to essentially lift up the entire VR industry here, right? So pretty much 70 to 80% of the devices that are sold here for the standalones are actually using our software stack and our store. So we actually we don't really need to sell that much of our own products to that consumer base because we're already servicing them with our content, and then they're familiar with it.
It's similar to the Steam model in the West, with Steam sort of as the underpinnings of like essentially every PC manufacturer's gaming infrastructure.
Yeah, you can think of it that way, or kind of what Daydream was trying to be, 5 years ago before they shut themselves down. So we provide the Vive Wave SDK to our other vendors in the market, and we support them. We give them technical support to enable them to be able to actually create solutions. In fact, iQIYI, which is one of the top 2 or 3 standalone manufacturers here, their controller is our controller that we made for the Focus, and we just essentially let them use that. Right. So we're quite ecosystem friendly. I'll just say that.
so things like the Pico headsets, which are also sort of well adopted, or many of them are using the Vive SDK and underpinnings and essentially operating system to run that, correct?
Yep. Yeah. So they're also one of our partners and using our store and our SDK. So, but I think they also have their own store. So they're kind of a dual store model, whereas the iQIYI one is really just a single store. I think Pico has aspirations to be a bigger player, so they want to kind of maintain some level of autonomy, which is understandable. Yeah, but the consumer business, I think it's growing, but in China, I think still actually I would say 70% of the sales volume is and revenues is going to B2B. So I think it's actually a very different mix than what you see in the West. I mean, if you look at in the West, it's mostly Quest and consumers, right? Because most businesses are not going to use it.
There's also Sony PlayStation, which still has more VR units out there than Quest.
I think they've been overtaken, and their growth is very minimal. I mean, they had quite a bit of sales the first few years, but last year or two, they definitely slowed down a lot. I think a lot of people are waiting for the PSVR 2, which is supposed to come out in the next year or so. So I think they haven't really updated much content as well for that platform. It's a 5-year or 6-year-old product that really needs a refresh. So
could you give us some examples of some of the enterprise level adoption that you're seeing in Asia? Because if it's B2B, I think our audience would like to know what are they using it for? Like what companies are adopting it and how?
Yeah, I mean, some examples. Let's say the biggest driving schools in China are using us in their as a required part of their driving education process. Yeah, so one of our there's one place in Beijing, just outside of Beijing. They graduate about 250,000 students a year. It's supposed to be the biggest driving school in the world, according to Guinness Book of World Records. And they have every single user try out and essentially do 50 different scenarios. You're driving at night, you're driving when a dog jumps out in front of you, driving a truck stops in front of you. So you're able to really simulate a lot of environments and circumstances that you can't do in the real world. And because of that, their passing rate doubles for when they go take the real test, right? So in the same amount of time, they can graduate essentially twice as many students. So it saves them money. It saves them instructors too.
So is that something that's going to really sweep the country pretty quickly, you think?
Yeah. I mean, they have 5 locations now. They're going to do a few more. I mean, one location is like 200,000 students. So,
Oh, wow.
so they're buying a lot of units.
200,000
China,
is a lot of students.
This China scope dynamic. but I think it's really interesting. Because Charlie and I,
it's a different scale.
Yeah. Charlie, you and I talk a lot about enterprise use cases a lot, right?
Yep.
And that is a perfect example, probably not well known in the West.
No.
This massive driving school with massive amount of numbers, hundreds of thousands of people putting on VR and living in a simulation.
There is an entrepreneur's dream right there. Maybe this entrepreneur is listening to us right now.
Yep.
Because that is a great opportunity that has tremendous scale and obviously 20, thousands and thousands of successful proxies out there in the marketplace. I think we're out of time. Ted's got to go to a meeting. We've been chatting for a half an hour. Alvin, it's so great to see you. Thanks again for joining us this morning.
I think he might have literally bolted to
He literally bolted.
No, he's there.
No,
he's here.
I'm here. I'm here. Because the network's not very good, so I turned off my video because just to improve the network quality. So,
well, thanks for joining us. As Charlie said, I'm off to my next meeting, and Charlie's off to his whatever he's doing, and we will catch up in another day or so.
All right, I missed you, man. I hope I see you in the reel.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alvin.
For sure. I look forward to seeing both of you guys. So have a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. That's our show. Get out of here. Have a great weekend.
See ya.